Hello dear students, today we start new model timekeeping devices. Open your books at page 49, exercise 1. Let's start with new vocabulary words, listen to them, write down new vocabularies and don't forget to learn them by heart.
Burn, cast, divide, existence, fill, flow,
lit,
obelisk,
oil lamp, passing,
practice, shadow, stick,
sundial, water clock,
Now exercise 1. We are to complete the sentence with the following words. Paragraph A. A flat disc made from stone or wood with marking on it and a stick on the top. The shadow cast by the stick in the light of the sun could tell observers what part of the day it was. Paragraph B. The shadow created by the sun to divide the day into parts. The practice dates back to ancient Egypt. The shadow cast by the Washington Monument in the Washington, D.C. Paragraph C. Have been in existence since at least 1500 BCE. They used the flow of water to measure the passing of time. And the last paragraph. Clocks were glass containers filled with oil. A wick was placed on the oil and lit. As the wick burned and the oil was used up. Now let's read the text, watch the video and check.
The history of timekeeping devices. Let's look at some interesting timekeeping devices used throughout history. Sundials are the earliest known timekeeping devices, used from at least 3500 BCE. They consisted of a flat disc made from stone or wood with markings on it and a stick on top. The shadow cast by the stick in the light of the sun could tell observers what part of the day it was. Obelisks, like sundials, used the shadow created by the sun to divide the day into parts, but in this case, the stick was a monument. The practice dates back to ancient Egypt, but has not been forgotten. The shadow cast by Taipei 101, Taiwan, the world's tallest building when it was completed in 2004, can be used to tell the time. Water clocks, also called clepsydras, have been in existence since at least 1500 BCE. They used the flow of water to measure the passing of time. They were originally stone and were used by the ancient Egyptians and Babylonians. Oil lamp clocks were glass containers filled with oil. A wick was placed in the oil and lit. As the wick burned and the oil was used up, markings on the side of the container could be used to indicate how much time had passed. Oil lamps were at the peak of their popularity in the 18th century and are no longer used today. Have you ever seen any of these devices? How else can we measure time?
In exercise 2 listening, you are to listen to students talking about ancient timekeeping devices and answer the questions.
Hi, Ben. Have you started Professor Hopkins' assignment yet? Did you choose to write about sundials or water clocks?
Water clocks, of course. What is there to say about sundials? They're so simplistic.
I don't agree. I chose sundials because they've got such an interesting history. They were the first timekeeping device ever invented. And although they seem simple to us now, they were actually quite remarkable 3,500 years ago. I find it fascinating that ancient people even thought to measure time by tracking the movement of the sun.
I can't argue with that. It was an inspirational idea to use the sun's passage across the sky to divide the day into parts. I suppose I always compare ancient timekeeping devices to the way we measure time today, so naturally a sundial looks primitive next to a digital watch. but I suppose measuring time had a different meaning back then. I mean, the concept of minutes and seconds didn't even exist.
Right. It was a different world, and although sundials seem outdated today, they were the first step on our path to atomic clocks and coordinated universal time.
What is the boy's opinion of sundials?
The boy thinks that sundials are too simplistic and there is little to say about them.
What do they both agree on?
The speakers agree that the fact ancient people thought to measure time by the movement of the sun was inspirational. The speakers agree that the fact ancient people thought to measure time by the movement of the sun was fascinating.
Did you know? You can see an hourglass in the Australian Parliament.
And now you are to close your books and write a few sentences about each one of these timekeeping devices. Listen to the model.
Sundials rely on the sun to tell the time. They use a stick and look at the shadow cast by the stick in order to tell the time. Obelisks are similar to sundials, except the stick is a monument. Even tall buildings like the Washington Monument in Washington, D.C., USA, can be used as an obelisk. Water clocks were stone objects that used the movement of water to tell the time. Oil lamp clocks worked by burning oil over time. You could tell how much time had passed by how much oil had disappeared from the lamp.
And now open your books at page 50. We are going to discuss timekeeping in ancient Egypt. Exercise 1. The picture shows the mercury and how it was used by ancient Egyptians to tell the time. You are to fill in. Now let's check, listen and repeat.
Pole star. Merket. Sighting tool. Bay. Plumb line. Observer.
In exercise 2, you are to listen and read the text and answer the questions. What differentiated the mercury from the other timekeeping devices? What else was it used for?
The mercury used the stars to tell the time and could be used at night. Experts claim that the mercury was used to accurately establish straight lines in construction and to align temples and tombs with celestial bodies.
Before reading the text, let's get acquainted with new words. Listen to them and write down in your vocabularies.
Accomplish. Alignment.
Carve. Civilization. Depict.
Equal.
Excavate. Imaginary. Keep track of.
Meridian.
Overcome.
Plumb line. Precisely.
Preserve.
For thousands of years, humans have been using various devices to keep track of the time. The ancient Egyptians, who have always been recognized for their skill in mathematics, architecture, and astronomy, are no exception. In fact, they are widely regarded as one of the first civilizations to divide the day into equal parts, 12 hours of the day and 12 hours of the night. They accomplished this using timekeeping devices like the sundial and shadow clock, both of which relied on the sun, and the merket, the oldest known astronomical tool. The purpose of the merket, which has also been called a star clock, was to tell the time at night using the stars, the alignments of which ancient astronomers had long been tracking. The invention of the merket marked a significant improvement in timekeeping because even though it was not as quick or simple to use, it overcame a major disadvantage of the sundial as a timekeeper, namely its uselessness at night. Shaped like the letter L and typically carved from wood or bone, the merket consisted of a horizontal bar that ends with a short vertical arm pointing upwards. Attached to the end of this upright arm was a plumb line, which is a length of string with a weight fastened to the end. The force of gravity allowed it to hang straight down, establishing a perfectly vertical line to the ground. The merket was used in conjunction with a sighting tool known as a bay, which was made from the central rib of a palm leaf and had a thin V-shaped slit cut out at the top. When observers looked through this narrow slit, They could precisely line up objects in the distance. To tell the time at night, 2 observers, a pair of merkets, and 2 bays were needed. An observer held his merket up at arm's length and aligned it with the North Star, also called the Pole Star. To ensure perfect alignment, he looked through the slit of the bay, which was held close to the eye. Another observer, facing him a short distance away, also used a bay to precisely align the plumb line of his merket with that of the first observer. This series of alignments established a north-south meridian, an imaginary line that identifies north and south. By noting the intervals at which certain stars crossed this meridian, observers were able to mark the passage of time in hours. Interestingly, the use of the merket was not limited to timekeeping. Other ways in which ancient Egyptians used this tool have been proposed. For instance, experts claim that merkets had also been used by the ancient Egyptians in construction to accurately establish straight lines and right angles, and to carefully align temples and tombs with celestial bodies. Archaeologists have excavated and preserved a few of these devices, which date as far back as 600 BCE. Today, merkets are on display in museums in Egyptian artifact exhibitions, and are depicted in a number of ancient Egyptian works of art.
In exercise 3, you are to read the text again, and for questions, choose the correct answer. Let's check. What does the writer say about the ancient Egyptians? They possess scientific skills and knowledge. What is not true about the merket? It does not require the use of a bay. What was measured to determine how much time had passed? The movement of stars across the meridian line. What is the main purpose of the text? To describe an ancient timekeeping device. In exercise 4, you are to match the words or phrases to their synonyms. Let's check. Positions means alignments. Pictured, depicted. Accurately, precisely. Record, keep track of. Surpassed, overcame. Groups of people who share society, culture, and way of life. Civilizations. Sculpted, carved. Kept safe, preserved. Non-existent, imaginary. Dug up, excavated. Achieved, accomplished. Identical, equal. Now let's revise our grammar. Present perfect we use for actions which started in the past and continue up to the present, especially with dative verbs such as be, have, like, know, etc. Time expressions used with the present perfect for, since, already, just, yet, never, ever, recently, so far, etc.
I have been a volunteer at this animal shelter for 2 years.
We use present perfect continuous to place emphasis on the duration of an action that started in the past and continues up to the present. Time expressions used with the present perfect continuous for, since, all morning, all day, all week, how long, etc.
She has been taking photos of the wildlife all day.
Present perfect is also used to talk about a past action which has a visible result in the present.
Susan has bought a new hat for her holiday. She looks very smart.
And we use the present perfect continuous for an action that started in the past and lasted for some time. It may still be continuing or having finished, but it has left a visible result in the present.
Loggerhead turtles have been laying their eggs in this area for many years.
Past perfect is used for an action which finished before another past action or before a stated time in the past.
The wildlife photographer had never taken a photo of a condor before.
And past perfect continuous is used to put emphasis on the duration of an action which started and finished in the past before another action or stated time in the past, usually with for or since.
Bill had been climbing for 3 hours before he reached the top.
The past perfect is used for an action which finished in the past and whose result was visible at the later point of the past.
The tourists were amazed at all the wildlife they had seen in the jungle.
And past perfect continuous is used for an action which lasted for some time in the past and whose result was visible in the past.
They had been hiking for hours, so they were exhausted.
And now look at the table of the passive forms. We form the passive with the verb to be in the appropriate tense and the past participle of the main verb. For example, in present simple active buys, in passive is bought. Present continuous is buying, passive is being bought. Past simple bought, in passive was bought. Past continuous was buying, passive was being bought. Present perfect simple has bought, passive has been bought. Past perfect simple had bought, in passive had been bought. Future simple will buy, in passive will be bought. Future perfect simple will have bought, in passive will have been bought. Modal verbs may buy, may be bought. In infinitives, need to buy, needs to be bought. We use the passive when the person, people doing an action is unknown, unimportant, or obvious from the context.
Ilalatau National Park in Kazakhstan was created in 1996.
When the action itself is more important than the person or people doing it, as in news headlines, newspaper articles, advertisements, instructions, formal notice, processes.
Bad weather has been predicted for tomorrow.
When we want to avoid taking responsibility for an action or when we refer to an unpleasant event and we do not want to say who or what is to blame.
Fortunately, only a few people were injured when the train derailed.
When we want to emphasize the agent.
The book was signed by the author himself.
To make statements more formal or polite.
Breakfast is served from 7 a.m. to 11 a.m. in the dining room.
Changing from the active into the passive. The object of the active sentence becomes the subject in the passive sentence. The active verb remains in the same tense but changes into the passive form. The subject of the active sentence becomes the agent, which is either introduced with the preposition by or is omitted when the subject is they, he, someone, people, one, etc.
Volunteers clean up the beach. The beach is cleaned up by volunteers.
And now in exercise 5, we are to find examples of the present and past perfect active and passive and present and past perfect continuous active in the text. Let's look. Have been using present perfect continuous. Have always been recognized present perfect passive. Has also been called present perfect passive. Had long been trekking past perfect continuous. Have been proposed present perfect passive. Had also been used past perfect passive. Have excavated and preserved present perfect. Now you are to put the verbs in brackets into the correct present or past perfect tenses. Let's look at the model. Number 1. Has everyone already started their presentations on timekeeping devices? You are to finish this exercise yourselves. In exercise 6, what problems might ancient Egyptians have faced using the mercury? How do you think they managed to solve them? Listen to the discussion.
What problems do you think the ancient Egyptians might have faced when using a merkit?
Well, they can't be used in the day, so that's a problem.
True, but during the day, the ancient Egyptians could use a sundial.
Yes, you're right.
I think another problem might be if the sky was cloudy, you wouldn't be able to see the stars.
Yes, I don't think they would have been able to solve that problem.
I agree.
In exercise 7, your task is collect information about another ancient timekeeping device that was used in our country or another country. You are to include description, how and when it was used, who it was used by, any other interesting facts. Listen to the model.
Candle clocks were an ancient timekeeping device that were used before the invention of the mechanical clock. They were very simple and comprised of a candle that had been marked with lines spaced evenly down them. The spaces between the lines represented equal units of time. As the candle burnt and the wax melted away, the candle would get shorter until it passed the markings. Candle clocks are believed to have been used in lots of different countries. However, we know that they were used in Japan and also in Great Britain, where they were used by King Alfred the Great. The candle clock is also known as the first timer and alarm clock. You could put a heavy iron nail into the side of the candle and place the candle on a metal tray. When enough time had passed, the wax would melt and the nail would fall onto the tray, making a loud sound. However, the candle wasn't always the most reliable timekeeping device, because if the candle went out, you would lose track of time.